When he was in the 8th grade, Arlam Carr was the nominal plaintiff in the landmark case of Carr versus Montgomery County Board of Education. Moving beyond the threshold issues that defined Cooper versus Aaron, the Carr case directly confronted the all deliberate speed language of the Supreme Court's second decision in Brown versus Board of Education. The Carr case would become a seminal case in federal jurisprudence and remains a study in the role of federal judges who experienced the reality of enforcing Brown's holding that Southern school districts had an affirmative duty to establish and implement plans for the desegregation of public schools. In June of 2011, I had the opportunity to sit with Arlam Carr, now a member of the news department at WSFA Television in Montgomery. We visited about his parents' decision to file the case, Judge Johnson's orders, and the meaning of the case for himself, his peers, and for future students of civil rights advocacy. Arlam, before we explore the landmark school desegregation case that bears your name, we must understand that it was very special being the son of Johnny Carr, a seminal figure in the Montgomery movement who was a civil rights activist her entire life. Tell us about your mom.
One of the things I can remember about the time that when Mrs. Parks was arrested, Mr. Nixon called my mother, and this is what he told her. He says, "Johnny, they arrested Rosa Parks, and they arrested the wrong one." Because he knew that, Mr. Nixon knew that my mother and Mrs. Parks were good friends, so that's why he, I guess, called her for, well, I don't want to say first, but he was one of the people who he called to let, know that Miss Parks had been arrested. But as far as Mama, she was, I guess because of her upbringing, and my grandmother, who I didn't know because my grandmother had passed, but what my mother would tell me about her, she was a very strong woman, and she instilled that into her children. And so she took that from her mother. And one thing I can often tell people, even when Mama was a very humble person, she didn't do things to get the glory or anything. She just wanted to get results. Whatever it took to get results, she would do it. And in saying that, what she felt, I guess because of her religion, she believed truly in her church and God, was that, mankind should be, you might say, equal to each other, or not to take anything away from one race so that over another, everybody should be equal, so that it's not the east side has it and the west side doesn't, or the north side of town or whatever. Because she felt that everybody, because God loves his children, no matter what color they were. And that's it. In essence, I think that's the way she felt, was that, if this is supposed to be a country where everybody is equal, we say, I pledge allegiance to, flag or of the United States of America, not white America or black America. It's the United States of America.
What was it like being her son? And at what age did she begin to influence you?
Probably about 5. And I'll tell you why. It has to go, and I guess as we talk, I'll kind of explain it to you, or tell you about it. And the reason why I was involved in this suit in the first place. My parents worked for the Atlanta Life Insurance Company, a black-owned insurance company that was based in Atlanta. So their involvement in the civil rights, they were able to be a lot more involved in the civil rights movement and could do a lot of things that a lot of other people couldn't do because of the position that they held, but by working for a black company. Because back then, if you became involved in any kind of rally maybe or try to make some kind of change, and you were a teacher or worked for a white person, you could get fired. Well, they were kind of insulated because they worked for a black company, And so especially during the bus boycott, is I guess when I really became aware of what part my parents were playing. I'd ride in the car and I'd see people walking. I say, Mama, let's pick them up. Let's give them a ride. Because I know they weren't supposed to ride the bus. And in doing that, we would ride down Court Street. And I saw this big, pretty school. I had been in kindergarten, so I had been around the environment of being in school. So I told my mother, that's why I want to go to school. And she didn't have the heart to tell a 6-year-old child, you can't go to that school because you're black. But another thing was education was very important to her. So making sure that I got a good education. She didn't go as far as she wanted to go as far as education was concerned, formal education, I'd say. Because she learned a lot in her travels and things like this, because she traveled around the world. But at that early age, she realized that education was something that was very important. Because I remember one time she told me, she says, one thing about an education, no matter how much education you get, nobody except God above can take it away from you. She said, I don't care how much you have, material-wise, as long as you get a good education, somebody can come along and take everything you got away from you. If you got a good education, you can get that back.
I met your mother when she was 96. It was as if she was 26. As she visited with my students, she connected with them not just intellectually, but emotionally, and they were captivated by every word and by her personality. Was she that way all of her life?
Pretty much. Pretty much. A lot of people would call her the Energizer Bunny. She just kept going and going. In fact, one day, some members of the MIA board, they came out to the station. I was kind of surprised. They says, Arlam, do you think we should ask your mother if she wants to give up being president? I was like, no, I'm not going to ask her. You ask her. And the reason why I say that, we had a sort of a family meeting, my two sisters and my dad and my sister's husband. We were having dinner, and we had talked ahead of time. Let's tell Mama to kind of slow down. She was probably mid 80s, and so I was like, well, I'm not going to tell her. I'll be there, but I'm not going to be the one to bring it up. And so we finally, after we had dinner, we were sitting around the table still talking, and we finally said, Mama, don't you think it's about time? She went, when I get ready. But she had a few projects that she, even when she died, that she was working on, or that she was looking forward to being completed. So that kept her going.
Did she assume the leadership role in the Montgomery Improvement Association as soon as Dr. King's responsibilities began to demand his national presence?
Well, no, there were other ministers. There were some other ministers who were president, after Dr. King left. My mama was the only non-minister president of the MIA.
And that was for how many years?
Almost 40 years.
How did you become involved as the plaintiff in Carr versus Montgomery County Board of Education?
Being a part of the movement and going to the mass meetings on Monday nights that they would have, when things were going on, and again having my mom and dad who were his parents. I saw a lot of things changing, especially after the bus boycott in the 50s and the 60s.
And you had not forgotten that day when you were 5 years old.
I want to get to that. When Attorney Fred Gray realized that, we'd have to file suit in Montgomery for them to desegregate the schools, he went to people who he thought would want to be a part of the lawsuit. In fact, he talked to my parents. My parents said, yeah. He talked to a Methodist minister in town, a black Methodist minister, who was with the United Methodist Church, surprisingly. It was not the African Methodist Church, it was the United Methodist Church. And he had 4 or 5 kids, his name was Reverend Thompson. And then there was another lady whose husband was in the service, who had a son, and they talked to her about using her son. Her husband was in California, but she was here in Montgomery. But she was going to be a part of the suit. Well, when word started to kind of get out that the suit was going to be filed and who was all going to be involved in it, the Methodist Church immediately moved Reverend Thompson to Mississippi. And normally, in the Methodist Church, they'll have a conference, a yearly conference, and they'll move the ministers at that time. They don't, unless there's a death or something, they need to get a minister. They just moved him overnight. So obviously, if he has to go to Mississippi, he has to take his family with him. So that took him out. And with the time frame that we were working, that Attorney Gray was working under, it was sort of like, well, we can't start trying to get some more people. We need to go with who we plan on using. Well, the lady, and I guess he told the lady that it was just going to be me and her son. She sort of like said, no, I don't want to be part of it because of, I think the pressure that she thought that she might be under. Because when you did things like that, when you challenge anything in the 50s and 60s to change laws, there could be a lot of pressure could be applied to you, physically and, whatever things people would do to make you not want to be a part of it. So Attorney Gray called my parents and says, look, if we do this, it's just going to be Arlam, and because with the time frame. And my parents says, okay, let me talk to him, because they knew that obviously if I do this, I'm the one that's got to go to school, So when they asked me about it, the first thing I asked, I said, will that give me a chance to go to that, when I was a kid, that school I wanted to go to when I was 5 years old? My parents says, yeah. I said, let's go for it. And we filed, and the suit was filed. And I'll never forget, the suit was filed, I guess on a Thursday, and made the paper that Friday morning. And I went to school where I was already in school. I was in the 8th grade at the time. And some of the kids who had seen the paper that when I came to school morning, they said, Arlam, you realize what you've done? I said, I think so. I knew I was not. And that's the thing. Like you're here talking to me now. It was not done to change history. It was just done to change the laws that were being applied. So that, just like when Ms. Parks refused to get up off her seat, she didn't do that so thinking, oh, they're going to name museums after me and things. I just want to change what's wrong now and hear it now. And that's what I did. I didn't think, if I do this, 50 years later they may, do something. I never even thought. At the time, I want to get a good education. Because I knew at Lanier, the high school that I was going to go to, it was one of the top 10 schools academically in the country at the time. So I wanted to go where knew I could get a good education.
How did your peers react when they heard that the lawsuit had been filed?
Support. I mean, I truly got. I never got anything of saying, no, you shouldn't do this. It was the thing of, you do this, we're behind you.
How did you perceive the reaction of other parents?
The community was very supportive. In fact, they were so supportive that they wanted to guard our house. Dr. Abernathy lived right up the street, about 4 or 5 blocks up the street, and they bombed his house. And I remember the night they bombed it because I heard when it went off. And they felt like where we lived on a corner, and they felt like maybe somebody would come by, throw a bomb, and they could keep going pretty fast. And there was also a park, a city park right across the street from us that blacks couldn't go in, right across the street, but I couldn't go in. They thought that somebody might try to shoot, something like that. And they were going to literally come and stand guard. They were going to have some men come and stand guard at night. And I guess, and my parents' faith in God was like, no, we don't need that. Only thing we did differently at the house, their bedroom was on the front corner of the house. They moved their bedroom, and they came to the second bedroom, and I moved back one bedroom back. So that was the only thing that we changed. And also, people were first, it was in the paper that we were going to do it, and our name was in the phone book, and they could tell where we lived. They would call up and just either say things, cursing or whatever they might do, or just maybe blowing the phone or whatever. So my parents told all our friends, says, look, I'm gonna leave the phone on the hook until 10:30. I'm gonna watch the news. At 10:30, I'm gonna take the phone off the hook. I'm gonna put it back on at 7 o'clock when I get out. So that didn't, so we were never physically afraid for ourselves.
Judge Johnson's first order in 1964 enjoined the Board of Education from failing to provide public school education for black students in a school or schools that were not operated on a racially segregated basis, and from failing to take immediate steps to be effective for the school term commencing September 1964 to desegregate the 1st, 10th, 11th, and 12th grades in the public schools of Montgomery County. He did allow them to establish a freedom of choice plan, but he placed on them an affirmative duty to desegregate those grades. This was about the time that you were entering high school. What was the immediate impact of his order on you?
It's funny when you ask that. I didn't get to go that first year. I was going to the 9th grade when we filed the suit. Because we were filing the school at the time to integrate the school system and not like in this order, the 1st, 10th, 11th, 12th grade. So I didn't actually get a chance to go to school, to integrated school, the first year of integration. There were 3 blacks who went to Lanier and 3 blacks who went to Lee, that very first year. Then, and I believe in his order, was that the next year all grades, 1st through the 12th grade, would be integrated. So that and next year when I was going into the 10th grade, I did go to Lanier, but then there were only 13 of us who went to Lanier, and I believe it was about 10 who went to Lee High School here in Montgomery.
And that leads to the history of the next 3 years. That first order required that a student shall have full access to all services, facilities, activities, and programs. That included transportation, athletics, and other extracurricular activities that may be conducted or sponsored by or affiliated with the schools of the system. The order covered the reassignment of faculty and staff also. And yet in 1968, when Judge Johnson entered his second order, he said that from 1964 to 1967, no white children are attending traditionally Negro schools, and practically all faculty desegregation has occurred in the high schools. And in fact, he said that the construction of the newest county high school, Jefferson Davis High School, and Crump Elementary and South Lawn Elementary in all white neighborhoods was an indication that the school board's plans in 1967 demonstrated no real intent to desegregate. How did that translate to your high school experience?
When I went to Lanier, there were only, like I said, there were only 13 blacks students out of about 3,000 total students. Each year, there were more black students would start to attend. But it wasn't until my senior year that we had black instructors. And even then, those 3 black instructors that we had, one was an ROTC instructor, one taught typing, and was physical education. So there were no academic teachers, no English teachers, no math teachers, no science teachers who were brought in. It was sort of like, okay, we're bringing them in, but we don't want them to teach the white kids how to speak English or history, anything like that. It's sort of, we're doing it, but we're doing it slowly. Now, I think the next year, Jeff Davis House School opened, but where it was in a predominantly white neighborhood. South Lawn was the same way. Crump was the same way. And I left it with the college, so I didn't keep up with it as much because I went to University of Texas at El Paso. But when I would come home, I'd try to find out what was going on. But they started to close down the black schools. But Washington closed down not too long after, about 2 years after I graduated, I believe, in high school. So that we were like, okay, let's close down the black schools as we open these schools into the white neighborhoods or closely aligned with what was basically all white, because Montgomery was truly as far as living was not. I mean, it was just like the schools were. It was separate.
You mentioned the closing of Booker Washington High School. In another part of his order, Judge Johnson mentions that the expansion of Hayneville Road School and Carver High School, both in predominantly Negro neighborhoods, perpetuated the dual system based on race in Montgomery. Explain the significance of that part of his opinion.
Well, I guess one of the things that he was able to see, because it wasn't like he made an order and he did it for, say, Selma. He lived here. He knew what was going on. He could get in his car and see. He didn't have to call somebody to say what's going on down in this, another town. I live here. I know what's going on. I see what they're trying to do. They're trying to say, yes, we're following the order, but we're going to get around it as best we can for as long as we can.
He was saying that this 3-year period was on the tail end of 14 years of refusal to implement Brown.
And that's why Attorney Graves was like, we got to do something to make them do it.
Looking back, what do you feel was the legacy of this case?
I will tell people, if I had to do it over, I'd do it in a heartbeat. Because, you have to remember, when we started, we weren't welcome with open arms. We would odd people out. Like I said, on the 13 blacks, you got 3,000 whites. They didn't necessarily come on in and we're glad to have you, Because I wanted to stay in Montgomery, I wanted to get a good education where I knew they were giving a good education. In looking at what happened in Arkansas, and with the National Guard, and taking the kids and going to school and hearing students out yelling and screaming at the blacks who were trying to go in the very first day, I will give the school system credit for this. School started Labor Day on a Monday. Back then it was a big holiday like it is now, but they only went a half a day even on that day. So they told us the 13 blacks, students and the ones over at Lee, not to come to school that first day, because it was going to be a half a day. And then that second day, that Tuesday, they said not to come to campus until about 8:10, so that everybody be inside, so that we wouldn't have to be walking on campus and be going through name calling and things like this, so that everybody was already in the class. And once we got there, we went to the principal's office and they took us to our classes, which I think they learned that lesson having seen what happened in Arkansas.
So in light of the Little Rock experience, you can accept the way the first day of your experience was approached.
We never went through having to have, police around and things like that. It was never there.
Give us a final reflection on the case as we sit here in 2011.
I did an interview with a reporter from the station one day when the school board tried to come from under the court order. And I told the reporters, I said, I hope we don't go backwards. Because as long as the federal government held their hand or their feet to the fire, they had to do it the right way. Had to do it equally, and across the board for everybody. Well, to a certain degree, we're going back. Because here in Montgomery, they have implemented what they call neighborhood schools. And Montgomery, to a certain degree, is still, like I said earlier, you have your black community, and there are a lot of integrated communities in Montgomery, yes. But for the most part, you have the east side of Montgomery, and you have the west side of Montgomery. In fact, I was one of there were 13 blacks who went to Lanier among 3,000 whites. I spoke over to the school last year. A kid told me there were 13 white kids in the school now. Same school I went to. It's 40 years later. A little over 40 years, because I've been in high school 40 years. But it has gone backwards.
So in the end, you have hope for the future if we sustain Brown's fundamental observation about the role of education in life.
And that people somewhere down the line, I don't know, we may both be going to our rewards, I don't know. But at some point, people will say, like the Bible said, train up a child in the way he should go, a child, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. That was one of the things I think that my parents, and especially myself, was that if you learn early how to accept people, how to live and learn how to live and get along with people early, it's easier as you get older.